Gardens can and should be self-sustaining. Have you ever grown that $20 tomato? That's exactly what we want to avoid. We want to continue to grow and have our vegetable gardens give us back more than they take. While growing a garden is rewarding, it shouldn't be expensive. Today I'll be going over several efficient ways to grow a garden at little or no cost, saving you money, cutting your grocery bill, and helping you to be more self-reliant. I want you to grow a garden affordably. Starting a raised bed garden or even in-ground can be costly, especially when you're buying soil and other materials. But gardening on a budget and even no budget is entirely possible with a little bit of creativity and resourcefulness. How many of you want self-sustaining gardens? I do. It just makes sense, and to me, that's the only way to save money with a garden. When starting your vegetable garden, you'll need to decide if you want to grow in raised beds or in ground, or maybe even both. Many times we're presented with a lack of good soil, slow drainage, or very rocky soil. Maybe you really don't have any soil to work with, so we have to build soil or at least improve on the soil that we have. Whether you're planting directly in the ground, using pots, or building raised beds, the secret to success is starting with good soil. Healthy soil is the foundation for growing vibrant, productive vegetables. For in-ground gardening, begin by improving your soil structure with free organic matter. My absolute favorite is collecting leaves in the fall and then working them into the soil or laying them over the surface in the fall. Layer several inches, 4 to 6 inches if possible. Shredded leaves will break down faster when they're wet, and shredded leaves will also blow around a lot less. Shredding leaves can be done by running a lawnmower over them and collecting them with a lawnmower's bag. This seems like such a simple thing, but think about nature. How does it re-nourish the soil every year? The leaves drop, decompose, feed the microbes, things grow, and the cycle continues. Once those leaves have been spread, water them in, and this will help the breakdown process. And then when they have contact with the soil, those soil microbes will go to work breaking them down. Worms absolutely love leaves, whether they're on the surface or worked into the soil. Worms will come by the hundreds, and I love seeing this action. Even the worst of soils will begin to see worms. As the worms work their way through the soil, they create tunnels, loosening the soil. They eat the leaves, digesting them and depositing their castings, which enhances the soil, adding nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, all for free and little work on your part. Now, it's almost spring, so this is something to look forward to in the fall. Plan on collecting your leaves, the neighbor's leaves, and anyone you know that has leaves. If you have an abundance of leaves, make leaf mold. This is super easy. You shred your leaves, pile them up, add some moisture to help them decompose, and let nature take its course. It takes about a year or even 2 to break down all the way, but literally no work during that time except for maybe adding some water just to keep them moist. It does take time, but the nutrients and the good fungus from that leaf mold will do amazing things for your garden. Save grass clippings and kitchen scraps and even more leaves to create compost, which can be worked into your garden beds to enrich the soil. And the nice thing about the finished compost is you can apply it right away before planting. No need to wait like you have to with leaves. It's already broke down. You can even take those kitchen scraps and dig a hole in your garden and drop those scraps in. They'll start to break down, enriching the soil right in that area where you buried the scraps. And you can plant right over the top. You will want to add a few inches or more between the plant and the scraps. And if you have a lot of scraps, spread them all throughout the garden. Raw manures can be cheap or even free. These can be brought home and composted, or you can work the manure right in the fall to improve the soil for spring. You don't want to add that raw manure just before planting because it's hot and it'll burn your plants and stop the seeds from germinating. Raw manure needs time to become neutral, to mellow out, and that can take several months. And late fall and winter months are perfect for this if you're not growing in those areas that you plan to apply. When adding raw manure, you want the soil to be moist. If you don't receive any rainfall during the winter months and your soil is dry, the manure will just sit there dormant, basically staying in raw form. Water, soil, and raw manure is the recipe for rich soil come spring. The microbes in the soil want to break it down to get the soil ready and the nutrients available for spring gardening. The beauty of gardening is that it can and it should pay back more than you put in. By focusing on improving the soil naturally and using free or low-cost resources, you can enjoy a bountiful harvest while saving money and creating a more sustainable way of life. Raised beds are ideal for small spaces or poor soil, but they can also be used for large spaces as well. All of my vegetable gardening is in some type of a raised bed. You can build them from repurposed materials like old bricks or even logs. Pallets can be pulled apart and reassembled to the shape that you want, and they're perfect for small raised beds. And they're super neat looking. Metal fire rings, old washer barrels, vintage wheelbarrows, and old bed frames, whiskey barrels. I've even seen an old toolbox used. It all depends on the look that you're going for. I love different things to grow in, and they all can be repurposed to look amazing in your yard with a little creativity at no cost. For container gardening, use what you have. Large old buckets and tubs work great for larger rooted vegetables. Even large coffee cans can be transformed into pots for growing a lot of different types of greens. If you have a local glass shop or a metal shop, oftentimes they have crates that they give away for free, and they can be pulled apart or used as is. If you start to get your creative juices flowing and start looking around, you can actually find some pretty cool stuff that makes great raised beds. This was an old hot tank that we cleaned out. It's pretty deep, and so what I did was I filled it full of cardboard on the bottom, some sticks, some raw manure, grass clippings, and leaves. I let that settle for a little bit, and then over the top, about 1 foot, I put good soil in the top and then planted right in that. These are excellent for that. When you fill your raised beds like this, expect a lot of settling that first year. All of that free organic matter, the cardboard and the sticks, are going to break down into smaller particles, and they'll settle. Don't worry about it so much the first year when you got things planted. Just amend with some compost the following year, or you could even top it off with some good soil. Applying wood chips or straw will help retain moisture while improving the soil. And adding shredded leaves, like we talked about before, either in a raised bed or in your in-ground gardening, will not only help improve the tilth, but it'll also add just a little bit of depth when you're using it for mulch. A common mix of soil amendments to build soil for raised beds are compost, peat moss, and vermiculite. This all is fine, and it's not overly rich in nutrients. You're only getting the nutrients from the compost. I've used this mix with the addition of native dirt, equal parts of all those, and then also the addition of organic fertilizer. And it works well, but it's really expensive, and now more than ever. In the year 2020 in our area, and this will vary from place to place, for a 3.5 cubic foot bag of vermiculite cost around $30. Now it's almost $60. Vermiculite is excellent for fluff and holding water, but leaf mold does an excellent job of holding water, if not better in my opinion. And it also adds a plethora of minerals and nutrients and good fungi for free. Just some food for thought. Now it comes to vegetable plants in the garden. The whole reason we improve soil is for plant health, vigor, and most of all, food for the table. All right, what do you choose, transplants or seeds? I've always suggested that the beginner start with transplants. The reason is learning how to sow seeds for the beginner can be a little frustrating at times, but seeds give you more plants for a lot less money. And many times you'll have seeds left over for the following year or even years for small gardens. If a carrot or a lettuce seed is sowed too deep, they may not be able to emerge and even grow, and then it's a waste. It's worth spending some time learning how to sow seeds directly, properly. If you're new to gardening or don't have much experience, you may want to dabble in a mix of seeds and transplants and increase your seed sowing each year as you feel more confident. A little note about buying vegetable transplants at a discounted price. Many nurseries will offer half off transplants at the end of each season. Here's the problem with that. And it's not always the case, but it's something worth thinking about. They may be cheaper, and it can save you a ton of money up front on those transplants. But they might be root bound, which means that they're already stressed out. They'll have a harder time getting established and oftentimes never take off and produce. You can pop that plant out of its pot and check to see if it's been there too long. If it has, and you see a lot of roots circling around in that pot, and if it's root bound, leave it behind. The other problem is they may be past their prime planting time for your area, and they may just go to seed right away, and this is particularly true for crops like cauliflower, cabbage, and broccoli. And this may seem great at the time, but it's probably not worth it in the long run. You've wasted time and money. It's really a better investment to buy strong, healthy plants at the right time of the year for your planting zone, so that those plants will have the best chance at producing what they're intended to produce. You're not shopping for garden decor. You're buying a living item, and you want it to be lively and vigorous. Buy seeds at the end of the season when they're on sale. This can really save. Seeds will last for years. You can store them in a jar in the fridge, and that'll increase the seed's life. Don't store your seeds in a hot shed. That'll decrease their life and waste money. Learn to save seeds. Most are pretty easy with a little know-how. Beans and peas are some of the easiest. You'll want to save seeds from open-pollinated and heirloom plants, not hybrids. Some areas will have seed swaps, and this is a great opportunity to exchange some of the seed that you saved for some varieties that you didn't. And they're fun. You meet gardeners from your area, and we can all learn from each other. If you have some grow lights or a greenhouse, starting your own transplants can really save. Tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are most successful when they're planted from a transplant. A pack of tomato seeds can have about 25 seeds and usually cost under $4. Transplants can cost $2 and up for just a 4-inch pot. I've seen them cost as much as $7 each, and online, $10 and up with the addition of shipping. And honestly, at that price, you'd better learn to start your own. That pack of seeds could potentially produce $50 worth of plants. And at $2 a plant, if you were to buy it, now think about it if you had to pay $7 for a potted plant. Definitely worth growing your own. You will have some investment up front with some starter mix unless you decide to mix your own, and some transplant pots. But they can be reused for years. You could even use some soil blocks, some paper pots, or even yogurt containers. If you grew extra starts, you could even sell some of those starts at a farmer's market or other ways, even by word of mouth, to counter some of those costs, which is minimal when you're doing your own. Let's talk about feeding the soil. Plants need nutrients to stay healthy, just like we do. Compost is an excellent source of food. Compost that you make is even better than bagged compost. Compost made with animal manures are richer in nutrients than just your plant-based compost. And rabbit manure can be applied raw without the worry of burn like other animal manures. Wood ash can be used if it comes from a clean burn, wood only. It provides a really nice amount of potassium, but it is very high on the pH scale. So if your soil already has a high pH, I would strongly discourage you from using it. This can cause an imbalance in the soil and make your plants unhappy. We all have weeds, right? You can make weed teas. Dandelion, dock, and nettles all make low doses of fertilizer with different nutrients. These consist of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and minerals. If you want to learn more about how to feed your garden with common weeds, then I'll put a link in the comments section for a booklet called Feed with Weeds. In this booklet, it covers each weed's nutrient levels, how to make a fertilizer out of it, and also how to use it. And this also helps out our channel. Plant cover crops in the fall. Crops like peas and fava beans enrich the soil with nitrogen. They grow, capture nitrogen from the atmosphere, and store it in their roots and plant. Once they've grown to about 6 inches or a foot, chop them down, work them into the soil, or just lay them over the surface to break down. And that's free nitrogen, one of the most needed nutrients for green growth. Interplant vegetable crops in an area, like Three Sisters. Corn is a heavy feeder. Plant beans around the base and you supply free nitrogen. This feeds at no cost to you and also growing 2 crops in one space. Mulch your plants. This will also feed the microbes and in return, your plants over time. Use a thin layer of grass clippings, wood chips, or pine needles over the surface. Even compost can be used as a mulch. This mulch will also conserve on water, keeping the soil moist. Your plants will be healthier with a more consistent moisture soil content. Less stress means less pest and disease. Can you see where I'm going with this? Gardening has a flow, and if the flow is natural, it's easier on you and your plants. And what does this do? It saves money. You get more out of your garden. I can't stress enough. Grow crops and varieties that are suited for your area. I love heirloom tomatoes, but some years they don't do so well, and it's kind of a gamble. You have to ask yourself, do I have the room to have a row of tomatoes that may not even produce if I have a summer that's really hot? That's where the $20 tomato comes from. Don't put all of your money into starts that may fail. I like to plant my heirlooms because it's a hobby, but I also know that they can also be a flop sometimes. So I always plant the old trusty types that work well for me and my area. If you have a seasoned gardener in your neighborhood, get to know them if you don't already and make friends. And the more, the better. Each have their own successes and how they garden for their microclimate, which is more than likely close to your microclimate. Observe and learn from each. This will be your gardening community. Ask them what varieties do best for them. Plant closer than you normally would. By doing this, you're getting more out of your space while protecting the soil and conserving water. Grow vertically. Cucumbers, mini winter squashes, beans, and peas all grow beautifully upwards, saving space for other crops below, providing more food in a small space, using the same amount of water, mulch, fertilizer, and you'll have less weeds. Open soil is an opportunity for weeds to grow and water loss. If you have a bare spot, why not have some food growing in it? With the rising prices of fresh produce, it makes it harder and harder to eat fresh daily. Growing a garden using these simple but effective steps and ideas will help you reduce the dependency on the grocery store, and you'll eat better and much more healthy. Learning to preserve extends the harvest, keeping you from spending money at the grocery store. It's much better food and it feels good when you open your own bottle of canned tomatoes. Did you know that in a 3x6 bed, you can plant 6 tomato plants, a row of onions, and basil around the perimeter of that bed? And it can produce 60 to 90 pounds of tomatoes when they're happy, 7 to 10 pounds of onions, and plenty of basil for making pesto all summer in one season. How many of you like fresh herbs? They're so easy to grow, and they can grow right amongst your vegetables, and they actually help increase yields. A little pack of fresh herbs in the grocery store, which may I add, they're at least a week old, and they can cost $4 and up. For that same amount of herbs that you grow at home is pennies. They love being trimmed, they grow fast, and you can have them super fresh. By eating fresh from your garden daily, your garden will thank you. And what I mean by this is going out every day, you'll be harvesting what's at its prime that day. And that's when you can observe any problems that need addressing before they get out of control. I cannot stress enough, a little time each day saves a lot of time and loss later, as well as burnout. Gardening for success isn't about sowing some seeds and checking back in a month to see what's happening. You'll need to be vigilant in your garden. If you see birds and you just sow seeds, you might want to use a floating row cover to protect those seeds so that they have a chance to germinate and grow. Otherwise, the seed investment and time might be lost. That's expensive bird feed. If you don't have much time to garden, then just do a small bed or 2 for now. Something manageable for you. The right size that you can plant water, weed, and tend within your needs. Then maybe increase a little each year as you have more time and know-how. Lastly is preserving your harvest. We can eat fresh from the garden all year in many gardening zones. But in the summer and fall, when we have a glut of food, we can preserve those harvests to keep ourselves out of the grocery store, saving more money. Now that does take some time, and it also takes a little investment up front to get the things that you need to preserve. But these things can last a lifetime. If you're bottling, oftentimes you can find free jars on online marketplaces that people are getting rid of, or even find them at a second-hand store for pennies. Just make sure that the jar tops don't have any chips or cracks. You'll also need a water bath. If you have a large stock pot, that could work too. If you're drying fruits and vegetables, you might want to invest in a dehydrator. If you live in an arid climate, you can make an inexpensive solar dryer that just dries your food in the sun with an old window pane, some screen, and wood. I've seen some really good ideas and plans on Etsy. The reason I said arid growing zones is if you live in an extremely humid area with a lot of overcast days, drying food can take a long time and it can mold before it even dries. Saving money is just one of the many rewards from growing your own garden. From reducing grocery bills to creating a self-sustaining cycle, the financial and emotional benefits are endless. Start small, grow smart, and watch your savings and your garden bloom. Don't forget to check out the link for the booklet Feed with Weeds in the comments section. And if you've got value out of this video, give us a thumbs up. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you in our next video.